Thanks for joining us here on North Metro TV as we continue with Local Decision 2025. And we're going to talk now to Matt Audette, who is with the Anoka-Hennepin School Board, District 4, running for re-election. And Matt, we appreciate you stopping by. And we always give the candidates an opportunity to tell the viewers who you are and why are you running again, Matt?
Good. Well, thank you. It's a pleasure to be here. I'm a local person, so I grew up actually in Andover, and I'm pretty happy to be serving the community where I grew up. I'm running for re-election. I really want to continue to be a voice for kids and for parents and for other people in the community who want to have a say in the direction of our schools. I think that I got started in this actually during the pandemic when, like many people, as a parent, we didn't feel like we had a good say in what was happening in schools, and people had a lot of concerns. At that time, it was about distance learning and things like that. But as time has progressed, parents have really taken a different role, a more active role in schools, and they certainly do want to be represented on the school board. And I've been a person who has felt that, I've really been called to do that since I started.
Do you see the pandemic repercussions to this day?
We do. The distance learning in particular was pretty devastating on student academic behavior, academic performance. So really, we've not recovered to the levels that we were at pre-pandemic with respect to how kids are doing academically. It's just sort of like a lot of things seem to be lost or missed during that time. Distance learning was really hard, and that missing thing at every level of education is pretty important, and I think we still are seeing that. We also think we're seeing impacts related to student behavior and discipline that may or may not be connected to the pandemic. So it was just generally for a lot of reasons, a pretty difficult time, but a disruptive time for schools for sure.
So you've got 4 years experience on the school board. How can that help you moving forward for perhaps another 4?
Yeah, well, being on the school board is unlike things things that most of us do in our daily life. So it took me at least the better part of a year just to get acclimated to how school district operates, what the board does, how they function. So I really feel like having that 4 years of experience really gives me a running start in terms of just the pure process of being on the school board, and then being really plugged into the issues, both broad and narrow, specific to our school district. What's happening now, where are we at with the various issues, and I have a clear point of view on a number of the issues that are before the board on a pretty regular basis. So I think that that's certainly a benefit of being an incumbent. You just kind of have the lay of the land and understand how things work, and I certainly would intend to be able to just pick up right where I left off and continue.
So the district has had to get out the cutting knife and make some hard decisions, multi-million-dollar budget cuts.
Yep.
I think there's still $8 million left to try to slice out of the budget.
Yep.
How challenging has that been, and where do you see the remaining $8 million coming from?
It's been a real challenge. It started close to $30 million. And so, when you take a look at doing that in a school district, cutting budget, generally means, since about 85% of expense in a school district is tied up in people's jobs, it's difficult when you know that decisions you have to make are going to impact the livelihood of staff members and other people that are working in the school district. So that alone is a big challenge. The next part of the challenge is figuring out, well, what's the right thing if you in a situation where you have to make cuts? What's the right place to cut? And of course, there are not everybody agrees on where to start with that. For myself, I've really wanted to place as much priority as we can on academics and on the classroom. So I have proposed that really the district should follow more of a zero-based budgeting model to try to figure out staffing and the budget in the district. So my proposal was we should staff and fund all of our classroom teacher positions before we do anything else, and then build up from there. And that isn't really the way that the district administration manages the cutting process. And so, there's been some disagreement between myself and others related to that. I really just wanted to do our best to try to protect that classroom and that classroom teacher as much as possible when we're making cuts. It's been hard.
Yeah, no doubt. So Anoka-Hennepin does have a huge footprint. I mean, you're talking 2 counties, rural cities, heavy, dense suburbs. So it's a big mix.
Yeah.
How do you find harmony on the board with, as you said, there's some differing opinions. That's to be expected. But how do you find some kumbaya?
Yeah. I don't know that I would look to necessarily say that there needs to be kumbaya. There needs to be partnership. And our board, has been able to partner on matters that, are less controversial. So a good portion of what comes before the school board is what I might call pretty routine business. There's different requirements that the board has to take care of, and a lot gets made about disagreements that we have on the board. Not much gets made about the fact that we don't have disagreements about everything. So I would say that our board is pretty good at working together to try to manage through the routine business, and the disagreements really only come in areas that are controversial, not just on the school board. They're controversial all over our society, and we've seen the polarizing nature of politics and frankly, the tragic behavior that we've seen in here in Minnesota and across the country recently. And so there are significant issues in society. It's not a surprise that they're being worked out in schools as well, and there can be disagreement when those things are discussed.
Is it fair to say, though, that you want to put a ring around the teachers? That's your number one priority, and then cut from there?
Well, when it comes to schools in general, one of my top priorities is academic performance. We've got to figure out how to restore academic performance to where it was. Nearly half our kids can't perform at grade level in reading, math, and science. And so when you take a look at the district's budget, which is roughly $750 million, we need to cut $30 million. I really believe that we have to try to find cuts somewhere that aren't right there in the classroom at this time. While we're trying to get momentum going again and boost learning and academic performance, I just think we really can't afford to make cuts there at this time.
School safety. It's a hot button issue. It really has been for a couple decades now, but it seems to be really bubbling up. How can you let parents know that when their kids get off the bus or get dropped off in the morning and come back in the afternoon, everything's going to be okay?
Yeah, it's a tough thing. We really have. Schools are unique. There's threats from both outside and from inside. So from an outside perspective, which would be people who are outside the school, maybe not students or staff, who would come into the school and want to do bad things. The district has put quite a bit of priority to security and safeness in schools. The board has supported what they wanted to do. So whether that is things like access control or monitoring or communication and just protocols. As a board member, I can be supportive of those types of things. Partnership with local law enforcement. The state legislature a couple of years ago passed a law that forced school resource officers to leave schools because they didn't feel they could be there anymore. I was the lone board member who stood up with the Anoka County Sheriff and all the local police chiefs to try to call for a change to that law, and it did eventually get changed, and we got our SROs back. So having a police presence in school is a good thing. I support that and would continue to support that and more going forward. On the internal side of things, we've got a lot of problems with student behavior and with both district policy and with state law that are making it very difficult for what I like to say is the adults in school to feel confident and supported that they can deal with difficult student behavior. So things like fighting and violence are on the rise in our schools, and we need to make changes there to sort of bring that back under control. So those are serious issues. It's another one that I'm pretty passionate about wanting to try to solve.
And how do you combat that? What kind of resources would you give teachers, or latitude would you give them? Are they allowed to actually physically break up a fight, or is that a taboo now?
Well, that's part of the problem. So they definitely don't feel confident or comfortable that they can. So I think as a district, we need to do everything we can to make sure that teachers feel supported, and I've even gone so far as to say indemnified, legally protected from when they act in the interest of trying to maintain safeness. So part of it is support, part of it is internal policy that would really give teachers or other staff members the most, I guess I'd call it options as possible to be able to deal with student behavior. And then the other part that the district could engage in is we could use our position as the largest school district in Minnesota to advocate down at the Capitol for changes to laws that have been passed, in some cases foolishly, in my opinion, that have resulted in a situation where, I think this is really important. The adults in school don't feel that they can control the behavior of kids. That's a real problem, and we're never going to succeed if that continues.
What besides the teachers, what are your other priorities in protecting certain people with the budget and the cuts?
It's not so much of a protection thing. You want to take a look at essential. What is the most essential element? So, if I go back to this idea I have with zero-based budgeting, which is really just a way of, rather than starting with a budget like fully, developed, you start at the ground floor, and if you're going to add something in, you'll be able to take a look at it in a chunk, understand what it is, understand how much it costs, what its value is, how you can measure it, what our success measures look like. And before you place an item in the budget, you be sure that you can sort of justify it as a good use of money. And so if you could imagine doing that, at multiple levels, you would be able to try to sort through things that are, maybe they're good activities, but when you're forced to make a cut, you separate it. So my example always is, in my right hand, I put a teacher. In my left hand, I put literally everything else. And I say, there's a lot of things that could go in the left hand that are good things, that are things that we would want to have in school if we had unlimited resources. But in a situation where you don't have unlimited resources, I think you really have to ask, should the cut go to a classroom teacher, or should it go to something else? And that's all that I'm really proposing to do as a way to steer through it. And for reasons that I think I do understand and sometimes maybe aren't well described, our district administration doesn't want to do it that way.
So the Anoka-Hennepin mission statement is to, quote, effectively educate each of our students for success, end of quote. What does that mean to you?
Well, it means a couple of things. I mean, when we talk effectively educate, I think we've got to have proficiency levels that are far higher than they are today. So a lot of people get wrapped around the axle related to testing and whether testing is valid or not. Well, you have to have some objective measure to determine whether being successful. And so I think certainly performance on standardized testing or other measures to evaluate academic success is critical. Beyond that, we're a community school. So, if you have employers out in the community, we want them to be able to see our graduates, as somebody that is ready to be employed, that is able to be, no matter what the job is, whether it's a professional job, whether it's a trade or just some other function in society, we want to be able to produce graduates that, for sure the businesses and others in our community know that, they can come to our graduates and have a successful candidate for a job. So, there's a lot of different measures you can use, but those are just a couple that I would name.
Is there anything else that you would want to do in the next 4 years if you get reelected that maybe you haven't done yet?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of them are still related to academic excellence, but I would another thing that I think needs to happen in order to get there is we have to deal with the issue of cell phones. Cell phones in schools are a real problem, and I think our board needs to work on communicating to families why we need to ban them from school. What we have learned through time is that not only are cell phones a huge distraction for kids, and they're disruptive. Kid has it in their pocket, it beeps, it buzzes, they want to know what it is. And if you know anything about trying to concentrate, those little distractions just kind of constantly take kids away from it. But beyond that, kids are doing things with phones, whether they're filming things in school they shouldn't be filming, or whether they're involved in social media and it's having a real negative impact on mental health. A lot of depression and different things have been connected to social media and to phone use. And so, I have an objective at this point that would say that even it might be difficult as a parent to say, wow, I think I need to send my kid to school without their phone. I think our schools are going to need to ban phones completely if we're going to be successful in making this learning recovery that we need to make.
So you're saying you can't bring the phone into school, as opposed to say maybe you get into school, it's in your locker, you check it at lunchtime, it goes back in your locker, you go back to the classroom. You want the total ban? I
do. It's when the phones are in the environment, the students fixate on them, and the concern would be that they will be a difficult and sort of like a constant thing for teachers to try to manage. Who has their phone? Did they put it in their locker? Did they have it away? And if I'm a student and I know my phone is in my locker, will I be able to focus?
Yeah.
And so, there's a lot of people who think it would be really difficult to completely ban them. I think it can be done, just like you ban any other contraband in schools. And yes, we will need support from families and others. And yes, there needs to be consequences to kids who bring them in. That's the only way you're going to help reinforce that. But I think if we ban phones, we'll go a long ways toward fixing some of the depression problems we have, some of the behavior problems we have, some of the academic problems that we have. And, as I talk about this when I'm out right now campaigning, you'd be surprised how many parents admit that they know we need to do it. They think it's going to be hard. They have a variety of reasons why maybe they're a little bit afraid of it, but almost nobody tells me, oh no, we don't need to do it. And so sometimes we have to do those kind of tough things, and I think it's time.
Yeah, and just to follow up to that, though,
Yeah.
I'm sure a lot of parents have said, well, what if I have to get in touch with my kid? How do I do it? Can you go to the front office and rely on them to get the message?
Yeah, you can. I mean, the schools have ways to communicate into the classrooms and to find kids in school, and so it maybe won't be as pinpoint precise as we're all used to, but if I told you that having the phone in school was such a negative detractor to your child's ability to be successful in school that, I think it needs to be banned, I would hope that people would kind of acknowledge it. And we look at our kids and we see what they're doing with their phones, and we look at what we do with phones. But I think the difference between adults and kids is our brains are formed, and we have bad habits too, but we're not trying to, be educated at that time. And so, and we're, it's a societal problem. I think schools have to take a leadership role in helping parents know what to do and telling them we got to do it. And
finally, tell the viewers why they should vote for you.
Yeah, you should vote for me if you can appreciate the experience I have already in dealing with schools. I've come a long ways in figuring out how the system works. You should vote for me if you're a parent or another community member who is concerned about the direction of schools and you want to make sure that you have a seat at the table. I'll be your seat at the table. You should vote for me if you're concerned with the fiscal responsibility, the fiscal direction of schools. I've got 30 years of experience managing people and businesses, and people have seen me put that to work in the school board. I'm the guy that asks tough questions when it comes to the budget, and I want us to be fiscally responsible. It's a commitment we need to make to the community.
All right, thanks for stopping by, Matt.
Yep.
All right, he's Matt Audette, Anoka-Hennepin School Board, District 4, running for re-election, and this is Local Decision 2025.